another Paul Bunyan story. Well, let's see. There's been a truckload of stories about Paul. Wait a minute. I hear someone say, who's Paul Bunyan? Well, I better tell you who he was before I tell you what he did. Wouldn't make sense no other way. For those who don't know, Paul Bunyan was a logger. But Paul weren't no ordinary logger. Matter of fact, he weren't no ordinary human being. Chop! Chop! It was his size. Chop! Paul Bunyan was bigger than any man I've ever seen, and bigger than I ever expect to see. Shunk! Shunk! Why, when he was only 6 months old, his ma had to fix him a bed outdoors. Well, now that there was a big baby. As he grew up, Paul just kept getting bigger and bigger until when Paul was fully grown, he could stand in Illinois and cast a shadow clear across to Kansas. Now that there is a big, big man. Things went well for Paul. He built up a good logging business and he was respected.
Splash, 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 splash.
I'll never forget the time Charlie Svensson got himself hung up on a wavered log.
Splash.
Well, Paul was right there to see him. One day, a curious thing happened. The crew was eating breakfast and looking forward to a day of felling trees. Then in the distance they heard a boom, boom, boom. It sounded like Paul walking in the woods. But Paul was sitting right outside the door. Well, sir, they looked through the trees and saw a huge mountain of a man approaching.
Crunch, crunch, crunch.
When he reached camp, he said, "You're Paul Bunyan. I know that from your size. Everywhere I go in these United States and as far north as Nova Scotia, I keep hearing about you. How powerful strong you are, and how ding-dong clever. Well, I'm Hell's Helson, Bull of the Woods. And I figure that when there's two men on the face of this earth that are as big as us, they got to meet and see who's the best man." Well, Paul Bunyan took Hell's Helson's hand like he was an old lost friend. He said, "Hell's Helson, I've got no quarrel with you or any other man. I've made it a practice all of my life never to use my strength against another man, no matter what his size or temperament." Finally, Hell's roared, "You afraid to fight?" "Nope," said Paul. "Yes, don't believe in it. I don't believe in doing injury to another human being. But I'll tell you what. I'd like you to be foreman of this here logging camp. We can tell a lot more how strong and smart a man is by what kind of logging he does." Hells kind of grumbled and grunted and said he'd do it just to show everyone. Paul gave Hells his own axe, which was the only one his size, and sent him out with the morning crew. Well, sir, Actually, they weren't too unhappy to be working under a man like Hells. He was so anxious to show us how powerful he was that he did the work of 60 men.
Splash.
However, after a week or two, the most interesting things began to happen around camp. The first thing had to do with Paul's hot-cake griddle.
Stunk.
That griddle was so big, on a cloudy day you couldn't see across the thing. The grease that 6 cooks skated around with slabs of bacon tied to their feet. Well, that same morning, Hot Biscuit Slim poured on 2 tons of batter, as usual, and waited for it to cook. Chunks of hotcakes as big as boulders went flying in all directions. Do you know what caused that explosion? It seems that someone had dumped a case of dynamite in the batter. And it wasn't hard to guess who did it. Well, they figured Paul would blow up. But he didn't. A couple of days later, Paul asked Hells to clear a road leading up to a redwood stand he'd found in Oregon. The crew didn't see how Hells could bungle this job, but that's because they just weren't using their imaginations. When Paul came to inspect the road, he found that it twisted and turned and snaked around so many curves that men going up the road meant themselves coming back. The men all held their breath, waiting to see what Paul would do. Well, he took Babe, his big blue ox, and... Oh, I guess I'd better tell you about Babe, the blue ox. Well, Babe was an ox, and he was blue, and that would be unusual right there. But Babe was also the biggest blue ox in all creation. Why, he was so big that one day an eagle started out to fly from one horn to the other. Well, when that eagle started out, he had a full head of hair. But when he reached the other horn, he was bald. A bald eagle. Anyhow, Paul hitched his blue ox to one end of the road. Paul held the other end and shouted, "Okay, Babe, pull away!" The ox pulled that road out straight as an arrow. As a matter of fact, Paul had 22 miles of road left over that he cut off and sold to the government at a handsome profit. The curious thing about all this is that instead of Paul getting peeved, it was Hells who seemed to be getting redder and redder every day. Of course, there has to be a limit to a man's patience. And this limit was reached the day Hells took it out on Babe, the blue ox that Paul loved so much.
Sniff, sniff, sniff.
What he did was, he fed that poor dumb mountain of an animal 14 tons of poison sumac. Well, that sorry blue ox developed the biggest case of hay fever you ever saw. After a while, Babe recovered and Paul was able to turn his full attention to Hells. Hells, Helson, I wanna talk to you. And with that, he led Hells out across several states and up onto Mojave Mountain.
Strip.
Paul told Hells, you take this and write on this mountain 100 times, I will never again hurt a dumb animal. Well, Hells was first relieved, then angry. With that, the two of them got to whacking away at each other with their fists. After 3 days of the most awful noise, the mountain, well, it was borne clear away by the scuffling of those two giants. Yes, sir, just pulverized to dust and sand. In fact, it's no longer called Mojave Mountain. It's called the Mojave Desert. But they weren't finished yet. They fought each other through the state of Arizona, gouging out the Grand Canyon. They carved away a cliff in upstate New York, creating Niagara Falls. They plowed a furrow right up the center of the country that became the Mississippi River, and knocked each other down a half-dozen times, creating the Great Lakes. To climax this fight of the century, Paul landed one final blow that sent Hell sailing up into space, where he eventually hit the moon and was never heard from again. Paul Bunyan. Now that was a big, big man.
That really was an amazing adventure, wasn't it? Think you'd enjoy living in a place like that? You would? What do you mean you can't? If you use your imagination, you can be anywhere or anyone that you want. You and your friends could be walking on the moon, or pirates on a ship out in the middle of the ocean. I tell you what, let's continue our journey, only this time we'll try to imagine that we are in the story. Now this might be the most amazing adventure of all.
In the country of Japan, above a small village, stands a magnificent bell. It is called the Bell of Oji-san and Tada, and this is its story. Behind the village, there was a zigzag road that led up a mountain and through the rice fields to the house of a wise old man. The wise old man was called Oji-san, and he had a grandson named Tada. At that time of year, the villagers, Oji-san and Tada, went into the rice fields to harvest the rice. The rice was very important, since it provided most of the food for the year to come. First, they cut the rice with their curved knives. And they stacked it to dry in the sun. Tada also wanted to help with the harvest. Finally, the work was finished, and everyone went home to prepare for the rice festival, a festival held each year to celebrate the harvest. Oji-san dressed in his purple robe, and Tada carefully tied his clogged shoes before putting on his hoppy coat. Below, the festival had already begun. The people played music and danced as they rejoiced over the good rice crop. Before going down the road to join the others in the village, Oji-san and Tada paused to enjoy the view. They saw below the zigzag road, the rice fields, the festive village, the harbor with its boats, and finally, the huge blue sea that seemed to stretch away forever. Suddenly, the water in the harbor began to drain away. At the festival, the people went out to collect seashells from the harbor bottom. Quick, Tada, hand me a torch. He ran into the fields and began to set fire to the rice. From stack to stack he went with his flaming torch. Higher and higher leapt the flames, turning and twisting, burning and consuming the precious rice. Tada couldn't understand. He couldn't understand why Grandfather was burning the rice. And Oji-san did not explain. In the harbor, all eyes turned to the fire. The young men were the first up the hill to put out the fire. But Oji-san stopped them. Let the rice burn. I want them all to come. The people didn't know why Oji-san had burned the precious rice. They were puzzled and angry. Why did you burn the rice? Why? Why? Then, Oji-san pointed to the sea. A tsunami, a great wave made by the earthquake, is coming toward our village. Then the people understood. Oji-san had burned the rice to save their lives. Even Tada understood, and he was sorry now that he had doubted his grandfather. Tada tried to say something, but Oji-san just lifted him into his arms, and he didn't have to say anything. When the people rebuilt their homes, they put a special bell on the hillside to warn against future tsunamis. And they named it the Bell of Oji-san and Tada, in honor of the wise old man and his little grandson.
Well, this journey has come to an end. But you can take this trip any time you want. I'll be here. Or you can join me on another adventure with some more of my friends. Look around me, because the really amazing journey is in these books. And every time you read, you'll find magical new places and funny new friends. Well, I'm going to go and read a new book. Why don't you do the same? See you next time.